you know, this is something my wife has pointed out too. She said, well, men are going to have to stand up for themselves. But here's the problem. I know how to stand up to a man who's unfairly trespassing against me. And the reason I know that is because the parameters for my resistance are quite well defined, which is we talk, we argue, we push, and then it becomes physical. Right? Like if we move beyond the boundaries of civil discourse, we know what the next step is. Okay, because if the man is offensive enough and crazy enough, the reaction becomes physical right away, or at least the threat is there. And when men are talking to each other in any serious manner, that underlying threat of physicality is always there, especially if it's a real conversation, and it keeps the thing civilized to some degree. You know, if you're talking to a man who wouldn't fight with you under any circumstances whatsoever, then you're talking to someone to whom you have absolutely no respect.
It's impossible to respect yourself until you grow teeth. And if you grow teeth, then you realize that you're somewhat dangerous, or maybe somewhat seriously dangerous, and then you might be more willing to demand that you treat yourself with respect and other people do the same thing.
Welcome to New Unrealist. Whoa, what's got Jordan Peterson so upset? Looks like some clown with the New York Review of Books named Pankaj Mishra wrote an article about Jordan Peterson titled, Jordan Peterson and Fascist Mysticism. Fascist mysticism is how this writer sums up the body of work and thought that Jordan Peterson has promoted on his YouTube channel, his speaking events, and his books. And, you know, those extremist calls for men to toughen up. You know, you can't have that. Of course not. No one calls for men to suck it up. Only far-right extremists. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Whoa, not slouching or having a poor posture must be the ideal to which the new Marxist man aspires, because who else would want to, you know, not have a good posture? Well, not those fascists with with their ramrod posture. Clean your room. I mean, do we have to alert the Southern Poverty Law Center? I think that might be a cryptic dog whistle for ethno-statehood. No. The standard vapid criticisms of Peterson's work, that doesn't seem to be what the problem is here. This Pankaj Mishra seems to have gotten the professor's ire because he reduced what appears to be a long-standing, 15-year-long friendship, and unless I'm reading this wrong, even professional collaboration between Jordan Peterson and the First Nations wood sculpture artist named Charles Joseph to, quote, harmlessly romancing the noble savage. So Peterson is friends with the First Nations guy, an indigenous, and you have this snobby New York Book Review elitist douchebag calling the guy a noble savage. In effect, even if he thinks he's just pulling the words out of some strawman version of Jordan Peterson's mouth, you know, Pankaj Mishra, he's the one pulling out this noble savage descriptor. Nowhere does Jordan Peterson denigrate or look down on his friend or his culture. I mean, what kind of asshole is this Pankaj Mishra? Imagine if you were face to face with Jordan Peterson. Do you think he'd call him a fascist who was romancing the noble savage? I think Jordan Peterson put it best when he said he'd happily slap him. You know, he called his friend a savage. I mean, you just have to read through this smarmy, smug, sanctimonious smear piece where he tries to paint Jordan Peterson as a far-right ideologue because, you know, the author doesn't like Carl Jung, he doesn't like Joseph Campbell, you know, two of the thinkers who've influenced Jordan Peterson, or he doesn't like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, you know, the Soviet dissident and author of the Gulag Archipelago, who also greatly impacted Peterson's thinking. I mean, his reasoning for this dislike, it's no different than saying that the ideas written down in the Declaration of Independence are somehow invalid because the primary author, Thomas Jefferson, had some objectionable views that, 250 years ago were in fashion. You know, it's guilt by association, except, It's just with mostly dead historical figures via 6 degrees of separation. So, you know, you cut the normally mild-spoken Professor Peterson a little slack. I mean, in the old days of toxic masculinity, walking up to someone and calling him a fascist on specious grounds and likening his friend to a savage, you know, those would have been fighting words. You know, like Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr, I demand satisfaction, sir, or apologize or I shall challenge you to a duel. That type of stuff. Let's see if anything further develops out of this. That's all for this New World Realist. Like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel if you want to help it out. Thanks for watching.
We're not training you to fight. We're training you to be peaceful and awake and avoid fights. But if you happen to have to get in one, and I guess the philosophy also is that if you're competent at fighting, that actually decreases the probability that you're going to have to fight, because when someone pushes you, you'll be able to respond with confidence, and with any luck, and this is certainly the case with bullies, with any luck, a reasonable show of confidence, which is very much equivalent to a show of dominance, is going to be enough to make the bully back off.
Dr. Peterson, Professor Party, thank you both for being here today. I'm a political scientist. What I've studied is totalitarian regimes. Sorry, I'm going to move this a little bit. I feel weird. Totalitarian regimes I've studied, I've tried to look at the Iranian Revolution and the Islamic Republic in Iran, and I've argued how the Shia Islam that is taught in the Islamic Republic is very close to a totalitarian regime. But now I live in a country where my ideas are considered controversial. If you believe in God, if you believe in family, if you believe in having responsibility and traditional values, I feel ostracized by the community here. I came from UFC, University of Calgary. Over there, I didn't feel this way. There it was more welcoming. Here, I feel marginalized, and I do feel alone. And when I see this, it disgusts me that here they can do this, but I couldn't go to their events and do anything. I'd have to shut up. There'd be a disciplinary committee for me, but for them, they can break windows to God knows how old this building is, and it's okay for them to do that. So my question to you is now, being here, experiencing this, I'm starting to second guess that maybe the totalitarian Islamic regime that I was so, talking about and critical of back in Iran isn't so bad when I have a choice between having to be here and be oppressed and be there and at least have my ideas be okay with the regime. So my argument is, if this free speech and the arguments you guys are making here doesn't work, would that not be the next step for people to go towards totalitarianism? If dialogue fails, then isn't force of arms the only thing left? How can people compromise when they don't want to talk, when they want to yell? Thank you.
I think you make a very good point. I don't think we should fool ourselves. This is about force. And it's almost a dare to suggest that certain elements are not allowed to enforce their view of the world, and that speaking contrary to it isn't an affront to those values and they won't shut you down. I mean, that is what is at stake. We are no longer really in a situation where this will all be resolved through sort of gentle, reasonable, civil dialogue. That happens on the side, but it's not real anymore. It's not really where the fight is happening. This is an imposition of the force of the state. And it is skewed. It is skewed a certain way, and we are getting to the point where a certain kind of language, a certain kind of dialogue is approved and all right, and a certain kind is not. And that is the campaign that is going on, that this is all part of. And I have to say that your presence here and your endorsement of this kind of event is the kind of thing that has the major pushback to that trend. But the trend is continuing, and is a very dangerous one. And this is a difficult moment in the life of this country. Would you say, Jordan?
So some comments about your career, let's say. Okay, so you're a young man and you've got lots of years ahead of you. So, you want to prepare for the war and not for the battle, right? Okay, because there's going to be many battles for you personally and perhaps politically and all of that. And so you want to make yourself as articulate and educated as you can, and you want to have patience. I would say that there's no cause for despair.
You know, I believe that the people who are attempting to radicalize our society and to transform it into a battleground of identity politics are in a distinct minority. And I think that there's no reason to assume that we can't push the devil back into the bottle, so to speak, to push the genie back into the bottle. And so don't despair. Now, from a personal perspective, it's like you've got lots of things to learn and you've got lots of things to say and to write. And you're going to find now and then that you're imposed upon in a manner that you don't find tolerable, right? You think, I can't live like this, right? It's going to distress you. And well, then you've come across your moral conundrum, right? It's specific to you. And then that's when you have to grow up and think strategically. It's like you decide, are you willing to live under those conditions? If you're not, then you develop a strategy. It's like, okay, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight it carefully, intelligently, thoughtfully, on multiple fronts, and I'm not going to back down. Now, you don't make that decision lightly. You know, most things you should let blow by you because there's not that much of you and there's lots of things. But now and then you'll find a stumbling block that you can't get over because it hurts you. Like it damages your soul. That's the right way to think about it. Well, then that's the time for you to put your education to use. You know, and you'll be able to do that. I mean, you don't want to underestimate the utility of deep, forthright speech. I don't believe that anything can stand in its way. You have the courage of your convictions, but don't give way to despair. Like, this battle is by no means over. No, by no means. And it isn't even obvious that the bad guys are winning, so to speak. You know? I mean, here we are. Yes. We're having this talk. The university came out forthrightly in favor of free speech. Hooray for that.